Taoiseach, as the Dáil prepares to rise now for the summer, the thing on everybody's minds is runaway prices and the sky-high cost of living. Working households really struggle now to make ends meet, and they hear from you time and again as you dig in and refuse to include a cost of living package in October's budget. Today, a report published by the Irish League of Credit Unions reveals the big pressure on parents with the enormous cost of sending their children to school. And this follows reports from the ESRI, Bernardo's, St Vincent de Paul and MABS, all of which reflect the real, present and growing pressure on families. Yesterday, Taoiseach, you described prices as being at a relatively elevated level, your words. Well, that was one for the books. So let me break it to you. Prices are not relatively elevated. They are, in fact, through the roof. The price of a litre of milk is now higher than a litre of petrol. People here pay amongst the highest energy prices in Europe, and 450,000 customers are in arrears on their bills, and yet you propose to cancel their lifeline of energy credits. You and your government have convinced yourselves in your own out-of-touch way that things aren't actually as bad as people make out. Well, they are, Taoiseach. We're contacted day in, day out by people who are fleeced, stressed and pushed to the brink. So I want to share with you some of their experiences, if you care to listen, Taoiseach. Amanda: we constantly leave bills unpaid or late. The children wait weeks for new clothing and footwear. We both work full-time. I spent over €220 on my shopping last week, but there's nothing left now to make a meal today, as shopping day is tomorrow. We don't even have diluted juice left. Only for loans from my mother most weeks, we'd be hungry or sitting in the dark. Fiona: my shopping now costs €300 a week. I used to get by on €200, so that's a huge jump, and I cannot believe I'm spending over €1,000 a month on food. Brian: it's gone beyond a joke. We're drowning just to keep the roof over the kids' head and put food on the table. Something has to change big time. Joanne: every time I go to the shop, prices have gone up. €9 for a bottle of shampoo. And don't get me started on electricity bills, the cost of sending the kids to school, or the price of fuel. Why are people going out to work at all? Asks Joanne. Now, Taoiseach, that's real pressure. Amanda, Fiona, Brian and Joanne speak to the real-life experience of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of households. And then the kick in the teeth for people is that you flatly tell them that you're not going to help, when the state and government clearly has the resources to help. A surplus of €8 billion, and you propose to throw ordinary working families under the bus now and come budget day. That simply cannot happen. Tá brú ulmhór cheolaí de bhar freisna tá dul méid is a bhéid. Caithí an rialtas, pa costas warachtála a chur in Oireachtas sa bhuiséad. So on this, your last appearance before the Dáil until September, Taoiseach, I want you now to clearly commit to including a comprehensive cost of living package in the budget.
Taoiseach to respond.
Well, at this point in the team leis an hachta mar a bhíam go bhfuil brú gan áras tá brú ar dhaoine agus cos faointe na tíre mar leis an costas marachtála. Agus tá annach chuid déinte ag an rialtas go dtí seo chun an brú sin íslú. Agus an rulas táchtaí sna mína atá le teacht ná cinenne a dhéanamh inistíocht a chuiristeach in infrastructúr, cuasaí tathíochta, agus a lán nithe eile chun an brú sin íslú agus speice sin á dhéanamh againn san cána snéis a bheith againn mí dearad fór. I dealt with this again yesterday, Deputy, and again, your assertion that government doesn't get it is wholly wrong. Government understands that there has been pressure since peak inflation of 10% coming out of COVID and as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And this government intervened more than any other government in Europe to alleviate pressures on households through cost of living packages and also through additional measures within budgets. We are facing a very difficult scenario in terms of the economic situation globally, and you seem to be oblivious to the threats that are coming our way in respect of tariff wars or indeed a dislocation in the global economy. We're well placed to deal with it because of the surpluses we have and so on. But we've taken fundamental measures, such as the free book scheme, which you never mentioned for some reason. That was a game changer in terms of the costs that people have going back to school. And we did that a number of years ago. In addition to that, and the finality of it will be this September, every school now, free school meals. These were things up to 3 years ago were not on the agenda. And you ignore that. We've improved the situation in relation to carers allowance. And what we intend to do in the next budget is to mainstream mechanisms or provisions that will help to help people to deal with what is high cost of living, particularly in food prices. But that said, inflation is coming down. And it is at about 1.6, 1.7%. We're the third lowest inflation rate across the European Union. We're mid-table in the European Union in respect to food prices, even though they're still high, and very high in terms of beef and various other essential products that people have to buy on an ongoing basis. That is acknowledged. But it's also important that we invest in people's future. And we're going to transform infrastructure in this country because people need, with the population growth, which has been phenomenal in this country over the last 2 decades, for the first time ever now, we're back to pre-famine population on the island of Ireland. That's a positive. But we've got to provide for that in terms of our water infrastructure, in terms of housing, in terms of energy infrastructure, public transport and roads, and we're going to do that. But there are limits to what any government can do. And you're the opposition with no limits in terms of what you will spend, in terms of expenditure. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever turns up any day. You will spend $1 billion on it, or $2 billion on it. That is your philosophy and that is your mindset. And yesterday in Dáil, Éireann, I challenged your party to say whether you would support the Canadian-European Free Trade Deal, which has enhanced Ireland exports.
Deputies.
We were doing about 900 million in 2016. We're now doing 4.1 billion, which is bread on the table of Irish working families. That's how you deal with cost of living. Not to be against trade deals of that importance,
Deputy
of that
Mary
scale,
Lou
which has real
McDonald.
impact on the working lives of people.
So Taoiseach Níl clú agat, agus níl sim agat ach an irid faoin bhrú atá cheolaí. You see, your answer demonstrates again that you couldn't care less. It's spin and rhetoric from government again. I raised this with you yesterday. I raised this with you today. I will raise this with you every single day that I have to, for so long as working people and families are under so much pressure that they wonder whether or not they can put a meal on the table for their children. And I've cited for you the evidence. Don't mind us as opposition. The Credit Union League, the St Vincent de Paul, Bernardo's, MABS, all dealing with this on the front line, and you refuse to hear. You have the resources to intervene and make a difference. And by the way, should the worst emerge in terms of tariffs, and I'm very aware of that, the real casualty again in this will be the Irish working class, Irish working people and young people. Why? Because they have a government that cares more about the high rollers, the big bankers, your squadrons of junior and super junior ministers than you do about struggling households. And I've cited to you real live examples, and I want a response from you for them.
Your time is up. Taoiseach to respond.
In the forthcoming budget, this government will respond to those most in need. And what I would say to you, Deputy, we will test you Because this morning I heard your spokesman talking about universal benefits for the high rollers. That's what your spokesman, Per Stardy, said this morning. He wants universal energy credits for the high income, for the high rollers. I will test you and your commitment and your principles. Will you agree to targeting? Will you agree to prioritising those in respect of child poverty in the forthcoming budget? Because we will target and we will prioritise those most in need. And more fundamental than that, you dodged, you ducked and dived on the question of the free trade deal between Europe and Canada, which has brought huge benefits to working people in multinationals and in Irish-owned companies. Because its jobs ultimately puts bread on the table of people. Jobs. And your economic approach to trade matters in particular, because you've opposed this trade deal for years now. And yesterday you could not agree whether you support it or not. And I think it's a very fundamental point. Genuinely, it's a very fundamental issue.
Time is up, Taoiseach.
Because if we don't continue to expand and grow our trade, then we really reduce the capacity of ordinary working people to deal with the cost of living and surpass it.
Deputy Ivana Bacci. That's enough, Deputy MacDonald. Your question has ended. Deputy Ivana Bacci.